I had played 11 or 14 games in the NFL as my rookie season in 1968, and when I got drafted. And I fell through the cracks, basically, how that happened. There was a handful of players that had went the same course, and so I was in pretty good shape when I went through basic and advanced infantry training. So when I got overseas, my commanding officer, who I didn't know at the time, but said, "Who is this guy with this big smile on his face?" And I said, "Well, I guess I had somebody said he played professional football or whatever it is." And he said, "Oh, okay, fine." Well, they made me the grenadier. Now, the problem with being a grenadier, which was kind of a unique thing, was different than just being a rifleman, but you got to carry the M79. It was like a sawed-off shotgun, one-shot shell that was maybe about, I don't know, maybe 3-4 inches long as you carried. But you had to carry 60 of them. And so it was like 60 pounds added to your rucksack. Oh, and it took the toll over a period of time. You know, your position basically was to lob fire, in a distance, whether it be enemy position and or where machine gun might be or whatever it is. And so throw a couple grenades in there, see what happens into hooches or into an area where you might see some enemy activity. Later on, when we run into activity, was that we were up on one of the landing zones. Our sister company had been hit, and we were air-vac'd into the area to be support. And by the time we got there, things had pretty well died down, and our responsibility was to pull them out. Some of the wounded and some of those who had been who had died had already been air-vac'd out. But when we got there was maybe 10, 15 left that we had to carry out. So we pulled front and rear security and helped to carry some of the bodies out. On the way out, we ran into an ambush, and we were in a firefight, and this was like midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, and we had to leave the bodies, and we got ourselves out of there. Then only 2 days later to come and retrieve the bodies. I was in that unit. I was with a reinforced platoon, and our object was to go back and locate the bodies, set up a perimeter defense, let the airships come in and extract those bodies out of there. And so obviously we knew there was enemy activity in the area. We didn't know what had been run into. And early in the morning that day we were on patrol, and we had just taken a break. We were in a little wooded area. Finally found our location, moved out. I was 8th in line. I was carrying a grenade launcher, as I'd been mentioned. And so as we moved out, my point man was maybe 40 yards ahead of me when he turned the corner on this rice paddy and ran into some enemy activity, opened up fire, started a run after the NVA, and pulled everybody out into the middle of the rice paddy when all of a sudden the machine gun sort of leveled the area. So everybody dove to one side or the other and scrambled over to a wooded area. I was on the left perimeter. And so there's the machine gun. So I being a grenadier, my responsibility was to get some firepower onto that position. So I crawled on my hands and knees to the end of the rice paddy, and you don't hear what's going on, and you're focused on what you have to do. And there was a medic behind me saying, "Get out of there, get out of there, get out of there." And I guess obviously there was, shots hitting around me. When all of a sudden I felt this thud in my left leg. And I say that because my first thought was, to get my attention, he had picked up a heavy rock and threw it at me, and to get me out of there. Well, when I look down, I got these two holes, and one in and one coming out of my pant leg, and oh, it sort of hurt, at that time. But you got adrenaline pumping at that time, and so as I said, I relieved my shot, and I fell back, and I pulled out a sterile gauze, and wrapped it around as best I possibly could. I'd never been shot before, so I didn't know how I was going to react or what the deal was. And so I discharged my round, went back, and then continued to discharge my rounds until there was 4 guys in front of me that were pinned down until they got out. And when they got out, the medic came over, and then our responsibility was, everybody was off to our right flank, and so we pulled back to go back to our commanding officer. And then 20 minutes after we got back or so, the rest of the platoon came in. There was a big firefight going on, and we lost 3-4 people in the field that day. And then I get hit the second time as they penetrated our perimeter, and a hand grenade came into the perimeter. And when I jumped to get out of the way, I was standing on top of it, and it blew up to my right foot, knee, right, and thigh. I'm on the left flank. I'm the only person on the left flank, all by myself. And they're in front of us, and everybody else is to my right. I'm thinking, okay, fine. If you're going to try to circle these people, you're going to have to come up the left flank. I'm carrying a grenade launcher. I got one shot. That's all I got. They give you a canister round, which is like one big shotgun shell, but it's only one shot. I didn't have an automatic weapon, and I'm thinking this, okay, fine. If they happen to come up to my left side, hopefully they are as afraid as I am. You know, they're human beings as well. And if I get one shot off, maybe it might be enough to have them retreat a little bit, or at least for me to be able to get my butt out of there going in another direction. And that was my thought, and that was my plan, until the medic came over and said, hey, no, we're going back, this way. And I said, okay, fine. And we did. And so we were in a firefight for most of that afternoon when a platoon fought its way out or down there and dragged us out. We had gunships coming in to help us out. Eventually what happened was we had killed at least what we think is their leader, and so so all of a sudden they were confused and they retreated. I'm sure they didn't know what they ran into, and we didn't know what we ran into. Later on, we found out that we ran into a regiment of NVA. And if they would only known that it was a reinforced platoon, of guys, I think they would have overrun us at that moment. So, we pulled out of there, and then finally got to a scared area. Helicopters came in and extracted us out of there. When I got hit, went to the aid station. They cleaned up my wounds, packed my wounds, and sent me to Da Nang. And so from Da Nang, I would then be processed to wherever I was going to go or what they could do. Biggest problem was infection, so there was nothing they could do with my wounds except pack them and keep them, and so nobody has taken anything off my wounds. So I'm lying in this hospital waiting to be transferred somewhere, and they got a morphine drip, and it's really painful. I mean, it's just really painful. I'm out of it for most of the time, but I do remember this, and those moments of inspiration. There was a young kid that was sitting or lying across from me in his bed, and he was a triple amputee. They'd already taken off his left arm and both legs, so he must have really been mangled up before they were shipping him out of there. And but the amazing thing is that every day he would grab that trapeze over his bed with his one good arm, and he'd swing his torso over into his wheelchair, and he would wheel his chair from bed to bed, and he would stop, and he would say, "Hey, how you doing? How are you today? You feeling a bit better? We got some great docs here. He said, don't worry. They'll take care of you." And he would go to another bed and to another bed, and maybe that was kind of like his mission, but I thought to myself, wow, I mean, here's a guy that if anybody could feel that he was owed something, was this man. But yet his attitude was, hey, you'll be all right. You'll be fine. And was more concerned about his fellow ball. And I thought, well, if he could, it was a change. If he could do that, well, I can't feel sorry for myself. I mean, it is painful as it might be, but, I'll be able to get through this. And so you get those little moments like this that have an influence in your life and in one way or another. And that was a pretty big influence. The wounds I had, I got shot through the left thigh. Okay, they could be fixed, and I didn't hit any major bone or arteries, and so it was just kind of flesh, and they ultimately sewed that up. And I get hit with a grenade that blew up through the bottom of my foot, and so and it hit me in the knee and hit me in the groin. These could be fixed. But the problem basically was the foot. And two things had taken place. Well, actually one thing, which is that I got an infection, and I got a staph infection. They didn't tell me that. I didn't know it at the time. But because of that infection, they couldn't do any corrective surgery. So it started to heal inwardly by itself. So now all of a sudden, until that infection could subside, and that took like 3 weeks. So it started to heal, so they just let it take its course. So all I got is massive scar tissue, and within my foot, and nerve damage, and so I couldn't flex my foot, and I started to get constriction of the toes. So we had to go back and do another surgery to help cut out some ligaments so that I could get some stretching. We had to regenerate the nerves with electrical impulse. So I had to go through all this rehab stuff. And even with that, it was, damage to your foot. I mean, how are you going to run? Just because of that stuff. I always tell people, I said, we've all done this. We've all stubbed our little toes along in the house or doing it. And you know how painful that is? Right at that moment in time? How painful it is? You go, oh man, oh dang. Well, just kind of multiply that, and so because of all the nerve endings in the foot, all the tendons that are in the foot, and all the muscles that connect everything, because it's that foot that carries the rest of your body and your ankles and support, is that they said, nah, it will never. That's how come you'll never play. But I guess, part of my feeling at that time was, okay, I didn't lose it. I didn't lose it. And having played sports, what you learn is that you get hurt. You have bumps and bruises, sprains, tears, you get broken bones along the way. What do they do? They heal, and then you go through rehab, and you come back and you play, ultimately. And we've all been through that experience. So that was kind of my thought process. Well, okay, it's just going to have to take time. And the second thought process was, all right, and this really had to do with my future down the line, which was, okay, fine. Whether or not I could come back and play, I didn't know. But at least I never wanted to go down, be in the future and look back and say, oh, you might have, or you should have, or you could have, but you didn't even try. So I thought, well, I need to do everything I possibly could so that I can never, answer that question, and that I can look back and say, okay, fine, I ran, I lifted weights, I did whatever I thought I could do, and if it didn't work out, it didn't work out, but it erases that if in our lives, and we carry those ifs sometimes. So that's what I did, and that's what I did, maybe overworked, but it got me to a point where at least I think from all the effort that I put in is that they had at least applaud the effort and give me a chance and an opportunity.